Hello, how are you doing? One of the members of my online book group, Masha, made me aware of this fun trend that's been doing the rounds on Instagram of naming 6 books to get to know me. So I want to discuss 6 different books that have been such an important part of my personal reading history and why they're so special to me as a way of getting to know me a bit better, because I'm aware that some people are probably relatively new to my channel, or even if you've been watching my videos for a long time, you probably haven't heard me discuss these specific titles because I read them all really early on, except for one I read really recently, but I've not talked about on my channel yet. And I have stories to go along with each of these books. And I think it's so important to understand the context in which we read books, because often that has such an effect on what we think about a book, doesn't it? So I'm going to go through each of these 6 books, but I'd love to know your 6 books that would let me really get to know you as well. So let me know about that in the comments, or if you want to make this video yourself, I would love to watch that. Now, the very first book I want to talk about is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which I read when I was in high school. I feel like it's the first fully adult book that I read as a reader, and it's a story that absorbed me so much, this family saga, and gave me such a new perspective on history and culture, but told such a dramatic story with so many memorable characters that I was just completely wrapped up in it, and it made me a reader for life. And I remember reading this while I was at school in a chemistry class, and just kind of trying to read it under my table. And then the teacher at one point got really annoyed. Is like, "Eric, put that book down." And I was like, "Oh, but I want to know what happens in this story." And so I resentfully put it away and learned something about chemistry, although I don't remember what that is. I don't know anything about chemistry, so clearly I should have been paying more attention in that class, but no, I did not. Now, the second book I want to talk about is actually a group of plays, and one specific play, which is The Bald Soprano by Eugene Ionesco, the great Romanian-born playwright who lived and worked most of his life in France, and who is known as one of the fathers of the theater of the absurd. And when I was a teenager, I was more into theater and plays than I was into novels, even though I still always read novels quite a lot. And I wrote a number of, I'm sure, quite bad plays when I was in high school and college. And I also loved acting. I used to love acting so much. And so when I went to university for the first time in Boston and was living there, I joined this independent theater troupe, and we put on plays, experimental plays in art galleries and stuff, really pretentious stuff. And one of those plays was The Bald Soprano by Eugene Ionesco, which is a play about 2 couples, the Smiths and the Martins, who have a visit with each other and just discuss wacky things. And it's mostly a play on language. Eventually a fire chief shows up, who knows why. And but Ionesco wrote this play as a way of when he was learning English, and he would get these booklets of how to learn English with examples of where it showed these scenarios of the Smiths and the Martins having these conversations, talking about things which no one in real life would actually talk about, but for the sake of learning English, they were making all these very simple observations. And so he made a play out of that and turned it into The Bald Soprano. And it's this play that's been running for decades, ever since it first came out in theater in Paris. I got to go see it performed in Paris, which was so exciting in French, even though I don't speak French. But I acted in this play. I played Mr. Martin, so I know it so well. So I could watch this play in French and know everything that they were saying because I knew the play so well. And this is my actual copy from when we did this production. So you can see my schedule in the front of it that I jotted down, but also I underlined a lot of my lines, and you can see a lot of my blocking notes of what I was supposed to do with my character during the play. And it was actually a really bad production. I mean, we completely misinterpreted it. To make it more absurd, me and the actress playing Mrs. Martin, we dressed up like clowns, and so we were in this little art gallery dressed as clowns, but being very dour and serious. And but that's really not the point. You should play it completely straight as characters that are really uptight and really serious. To bring out the humor and the ridiculousness of all of the dialogue. So yeah, I'm sure it was a very bad production, but I had so much fun making that show and acting in it, and I really miss acting. But yeah, I love flipping through this and seeing some of my old notes from when I was acting in it. Now, another book that, even though I was at university and I was reading a lot of adult fiction, I feel like this was the first truly serious, like, work of art piece of literature that I ever read. And I came across it totally randomly in the library one day when I transferred to a college in Vermont, a very small college in Vermont, and was wandering around the library, and I found Virginia Woolf's The Waves. Now, I know I made a whole video about this specifically very recently and went on and on and on about why this is so important to me. But this story is just so beautiful, the way she represents life, the full span of life through the voices of 6 different characters in a very poetic and beautiful style that captures so much about the nature of our existence and our connection or disconnection with each other. I think it's the most incredible novel. And I read it at a time when I was feeling incredibly lonely, where I would just go wander around the library and find a book and just read on my own, because I was like, so I didn't have many friends there, and I just felt so isolated, and yeah, and so, but I found comfort in books. And this book specifically, even though when I first read it, it's quite a challenging book to read, and I didn't really understand it, but I was just entranced by the language and the style of it. I thought it was so beautiful, and it captured me, and so it's become an important companion for my life that I return to frequently. And it's like returning to an old friend, because it has so much meaning to me, and I continue to find so much in this book. Every time I read it, there are more layers to uncover. So yeah, it is my all-time favorite novel. Then kind of riffing off from that, a novel I read, The Hours by Michael Cunningham. Very close connection to Virginia Woolf, because Virginia Woolf is actually a character in this novel, although this novel is more connected with Mrs. Dalloway, because it represents the life of Virginia Woolf, but also 2 other women in 2 different periods of time, and the way it moves between those experiences to show how there's commonality in our lives, you know, across time. It's so beautiful and unique and powerful, and this is the most gorgeous novel. And also it's a very queer perspective, and me as a gay man, like, figuring out how to be a gay man and how to live as a fully gay man throughout my life. I found this really important as like a way of understanding a queer sensibility and getting to know myself better. You know, even though this is a story of the lives of 3 different women, I still felt so connected to it. And because it's through the perspective of Michael Cunningham, it has this very queer take on the world and life and history and culture. And also the film version of this is incredibly beautiful and powerful. And when I first went to see it at the cinema, I was bawling. I cried so much that my partner was really worried about me. He was like, "Are you okay?" Because I was just weeping tears. So powerful. Now, you probably suspect that this is going to come up. Yes, Joyce Oates and her novel Mysteries of Winterthurn, which is a detective novel, but a kind of philosophical detective novel that's looking into the nature of existence, as well as investigating a number of murderous, really dramatic cases. This novel is suffused with this like gothic sensibility that's so eerie and atmospheric, and the descriptions in this are so vivid and powerful, and no one gets real psychological insight like Joyce Carol Oates, which is why she's one of my favorite authors of all time. But also she writes in such a varied amount of styles, and this is a very self-contained, like disciplined woman who seems very very dowdy, but what she writes about is absolutely wild. Her imagination, the places it goes to, is incredible. And so yeah, I love this story. It's so intelligent and thoughtful and artful, and it's the first book I read by Joyce Carol Oates that really captured my imagination and made me want to read more and more and more by her. Luckily, she continues to write more and more and more, so there's always more to read by Joyce Carol Oates, and I continue to enjoy discovering where her imagination goes to next. I have this very uptight version of the Franklin Library edition of this novel, very self-important, like leather cover to it, but I keep in it some of the postcards that Joyce Carol Oates has sent me over time. I started writing to her very early on in the early 2000s when I first discovered her work and thought it was incredible, and so she very kindly wrote me back, and so we've been communicating for a long time, and it's been one of the great privileges of making this channel that it's given me the ability to actually interview Joyce Carol Oates herself, my favorite author, and discuss her new works with her. So I've now interviewed her, I can't even remember how many times now. I think it's 5 or 6 or 7, but yeah, there's all these different interviews with her on my channel now, and it's been such a joy being able to have that experience and connect with her and to talk about her work in this way and honor her work, because I think she is so incredible. Now, the last book that I want to talk about is a book that I read just very recently, and which I've been meaning to get to for so long, but for some reason I just hadn't got to it until now, and that's Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I know so many people have loved this novel. I think it first came out last year, or is it even the year? No, I think it was last year, wasn't it? But yeah, but I only just read it recently. And this novel is so eerie and but also really emotional and inspires this sense of wonder. And it's a dual narrative between two women who are married to each other and who are a couple whose lives have been disrupted because one of them is studying the bottom of the ocean, and she goes on this mission to the bottom of the sea, which was only supposed to be for a couple of weeks, but ended up being for 6 months. And when she came back, she was very much changed. And so we follow the present day of her wife as she's making observations about how strange her wife has become and how distant she feels from her now. And then the other side of the narrative gives from the wife's perspective as she's descending down to the bottom of the ocean and what happens there and the strange things that happen there. And I just connected with this book so strongly. I think it's so poetic and powerful, but also, yeah, really eerie that it gave me the shivers while I was reading it. But also it felt like, I feel like this is something that the best books do. It felt like it was suggesting certain meanings to me, which I felt like I could almost grasp, but not quite get. And that made it so compelling to read, and also such a mystery to like ponder and think about, that it says so much about relationships and our relationship to the world around us. And also personally, I just have this really like geeky interest in the bottom of the ocean. I love watching documentaries about the bottom of the ocean and all the weird creatures that exist there. And it is scary and dark, but also weird and wondrous, that I just feel entranced by it. And this gave me that experience of going down to the bottom of the ocean like that. So yeah, I completely adored this novel, and I think Julia Armfield is such an original. And again, like, it's so great to get a queer perspective in fiction and on these aspects of life, of relationships and working life. And Julia Armfield has a new novel coming out next year, and so that is very, very, very exciting. So those are the 6 books to get to know me. I'd love to know if you have read any of these books and what you think about them, or let me know about 6 books that have had such an important meaning to you. I'd love to read about that in the comments, and if you want to give commentary of why these books are so special to you, or if you just want to list them and let me try to work out what these books say about you, that'd be wonderful. So thank you for watching. I hope you're doing well and reading good things. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.